Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Oh,
It's nice to see everybody. I'm glad you're all here. Welcome to all of the master gardeners and the interns. We appreciate you coming tonight. This is a little bit different. Just want to remind you um, that you're muted and to stay muted. If you've got questions, there's the chat room. That'll be monitored, and Amanda will be answering questions at the end. So please put in whatever questions you might have into the chat. And as you know, this will be recorded and the link will be put up on, I think it's YouTube, for people who can't view it tonight, but want to view it in the future. Okay. And most of you have your camera off to save bandwidth, which I totally understand. And if we were here in person, I'd ask everybody, how many of you are outside gardening already with this nice weather? And my guess is that most of the hands would go up. Most of us have been doing something out there. I was telling people earlier that I was basically finishing up all the stuff I should have been doing last fall, but never got to. But that's the way it goes. All right. Well, without further ado, I want to turn this over to Nita to introduce our speaker. Nita, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight. Amanda Wayne-Bliss is a certified local phenology leader and the executive director of Indiana Phenology. That organization engages people of all ages in documenting the seasonal cycles of plants in Indiana. Amanda holds several degrees, including a master's degree in environmental science from Indiana University. She also volunteers at Holiday Park up in the Indianapolis area. She's a member of the board of Changing Footprints. And in her free time, she enjoys hiking, reading, playing board games with her husband and 5 children. I want to thank you, Amanda, for taking the time out tonight to present to our organization, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. I am happy to speak to you guys tonight. Give me a moment while I find the share screen button again and get the right one shared. I think that does it. Okay, so I am going to talk to you about phenology tonight. I am kind of excited to talk to gardeners. I have never talked to just specifically a group of gardeners before, so this is kind of fun. Clicking on the right screen here. Eventually I'll get the technology piece going. Advanced my slide. All right, so here we go. I would like to tell you a little bit about me first. So this is me when I was maybe 5 years old. I've always been a plant person. As far back as I can remember, I've always had a vegetable garden. First, it was helping my parents with the planting and weeding, but mostly with the eating, as you can see here. But later on, I kind of took over a corner and made it my own. 11-year-old me was the kind of person who gave their friend a potted plant for their birthday on the give what you want to get type of gift giving strategy. So definitely a gardener plant person here. I grew up, though not in Indiana. I grew up out west in a valley surrounded by mountains, and that picture there is the view from my bedroom window when I was growing up. A 30-minute drive from my house could take you through a 6,000-foot change in elevation. It was a beautiful place to live, but it was very different from flat Indiana, and it was also a desert. Indiana gets about 2 times as much precipitation as where I grew up. So in 2009, I guess is how we say it, 2009, I moved to Indiana to go to school, and I immediately started wondering how things would be different from where I grew up. We had a lot of the same plants, we grew the same types of things, but clearly there was going to be some sort of differences. I knew the rhythm of the seasons and the plant life in my hometown really well, but I wasn't sure what to expect out of Indiana. So I went looking, did some research, and wasn't really satisfied with what I found. Mostly what I found were things like ranges saying this flower blooms sometime during this 3 to 4 week period on average. And what I really wanted was like something concrete, like last year, this flower started blooming on this day in Indiana, and it bloomed on this day in Utah so that I could make some real comparisons, but I didn't find anything. So I started keeping track of it on my own as I drive around town in Indiana. I'd like scribble notes on pieces of paper or the back of receipts in my bag. And I carried a notebook around for a while until it got stuck somewhere else, not in my purse. And so I kind of failed miserably at consistently keeping track of this. And then one day, in 2017, I saw a random Facebook post that literally changed my life. And I want to show you. This is kind of what that Facebook post was. So what I saw was a map showing the status of spring. And this version right here is last year's status of spring map. It's a really cool map, and it is called the Spring Leaf Index Anomaly. Basically, it shows how a given year's spring leaf out deviates from the long-term average in number of days. So basically, it shows where spring was earlier or late across the United States. So here for last year, the darkest red on this map is 20 or more days early, and the darkest blue is 20 or more days late. What you can see is that Indiana in places was as early as the chart could show us, that it was 20 or more days earlier than average. And I think that's right along the river, probably down in your guys' area. And so the first question that comes to me when I see things like this is, okay, great. 20 days early sounds like a lot, but is it really? So we need a little bit more context here to understand that, because as you all know, in the real world, there's natural variation. Things are not on the same day every year, which is why we can talk about averages and it makes sense. So the question here is, are we seeing normal variation, or is this like out of the ordinary variation? So I've got another map here. This map kind of speaks to that question. This is, again, looking at the spring leaf out in the United States last year, and there are 2 different color scales here. So the blue purple relates to places that were late, and the green relates to places that were early. And what it shows is how unusual an amount of lateness or earliness is compared to the average. So the darker it is, that's the more unusual it is. And you can see here for Indiana, some of those darkest shaded spaces that they saw a spring that was as early as once every 40 years. So a spring that early happens only once every 40 years. And there were some places that may even be seeing the earliest spring that we have on record. So that's really kind of interesting. And the thing that really struck me about this map is how different regions have such distinct different trends. So out west, you see a lot of purple, a lot of really late, and last year, a lot of green out in our half of the country. So just something to think about when we think of climate change. This is not going to be a uniform change in any way. So if you look at like Arizona, they saw a really late spring last year, some of the latest springs on record for them. And just like each state has its own unique history and culture, each location has its own unique climate trends and changes in its own way. So, by the way, this is what the map looks like for this year right now so far. I pulled this map yesterday, and basically what it says is that spring of 2024 is shaping up to be pretty normal right now. The amount of variation that we're seeing so far in the areas where spring has arrived is that pretty typical. You see springs that early or late every 1 to 4 years. So jumping back to my story though, I saw these maps in a Facebook post and was so intrigued that I went to the USA National Phenology Network's webpage. They're the ones that created these maps, and just poured over everything that they had on their website well into the early hours of the morning. And I learned what phenology is. I had never heard that term before. I knew the concept, but had never heard the term. I learned about a platform they have called Nature's Notebook that makes it really easy to keep track of when things happen. And I was hooked. I signed myself up for Nature's Notebook, and it solved all of my problems with the scraps of papers or my notebook going missing or not being able to, find what happened a couple of months ago. It really is an amazing tool for keeping track of things. And so this story also happens to be the story of Indiana Phenology. I started the organization. It had its seeds in that first night when I was learning about phenology and Nature's Notebook. I figured, I was really excited to learn about what happened in Indiana and when things happen. So why not get everybody else or as many people as I can collecting the same amount of the same types of information when things happen. So that I can see what they see and really learn from everybody. So I started the organization to collect that information and get people to join me. And so tonight I really want to share with you some of what I learned about phenology that night, about Nature's Notebook, and what I've learned in the years since. So let's start with a vocabulary lesson. Back when I was trying to keep track of what was happening in my garden and across town on scraps of paper, what I was really tracking was phenology that was occurring around me. So if we think about our favorite season, about what makes it our favorite season, it's really a safe bet that what you are picturing in your head is something that's unique about that season and special to that season. And really what makes each season unique in a large part is the phenology. So if you haven't heard that term before, I guarantee as gardeners, you are quite familiar with the concept. You see it happening around you all the time, and you really need to pay attention to those things to be successful at gardening. So let's give it a formal definition. Phenology is really focused on the recurring life cycle events in plants and animals. So in plants, we're talking about things like leafing and flowering, the ripening of crops in the fields, the emergence of insects. We're talking about migration of birds, all of those sorts of things. That's all phenology. So it's really, I like to think of it as the science of the seasons. It's the study of those seasonal cyclical changes, which we call phenophases, as well as their timing and relationship with weather and the climate. So phenology is really a key feature of life on Earth. It's happening all the time. Spring, summer, fall, winter, something phenological related is happening. So in the natural world, birds time their nesting so that their eggs hatch when the insects are available to feed their nestlings. And the insect emergence is synchronized with the leaf out and their host plants. Even people have this connection to phenology. If you think about allergy season, for instance, when particular flowers are blooming, that's when those allergies flare up. And obviously farmers and gardeners really pay attention closely to the phenology and also how what the plants are doing relates to the weather. So just to reiterate, phenology is literally happening everywhere right now. So when we talk about phenology, we talk about phenophases. So these are the discrete observable life cycle events in plants and animals. So with animals, you talk about things like their activity, their reproductive behaviors, or their development stage. With plants, we're looking at the leaves and the flowers and the fruits and their development stages. So sadly, many people today spend most of their time indoors and are really disconnected with nature and the outdoors and the world that's going on kind of in the background. Um, as humans, we in the past paid a lot more careful attention to our surroundings. We kind of had to, but even though we kind of have this disconnect as a culture, as humans, in our today, phenology and nature really are just as important to our lives and our very survival as they were in the past. So let's look at some of the ways that phenology affects our lives. It really affects nearly all aspects of the environment. On a large scale, it affects the abundance and diversity of organisms, their interactions with each other, their functions in the food web, and their seasonal behavior. And on a global scale, phenology impacts the cycles of water, carbon, and other chemical elements. It plays a role in our health. Think of those allergies again, but it also plays a role in pest-borne diseases. So when we are most at risk from mosquito-borne diseases is related to the mosquito phenology and their activity and their life cycle stages. And the timing of different plant and animal activities really impacts our recreation opportunities, our conservation activities, what things need to happen, and it even affects the potential and hazards and risks that we may face at any point in time. It also happens to be an indicator of environmental change of all different types. So right now it's really important for climate change science because changes in phenological events like flowering and bird migrations are among the most sensitive biological responses to climate, which makes them among the most sensitive biological responses to climate change. We see that change showing up in phenology before we see a lot of the other impacts. So, climate change, we are seeing things changing. Here are some of the phenology shifts that we are seeing occur or have seen in the recent past. So when we look at spring phenology events that have occurred, scientists are seeing that on average, springs are starting 2 days earlier per decade than they did in the past. And they're seeing this trend toward earlier spring activity in 62% of the species studied. So not everything is shifting, but more than half of the things are shifting. We're talking about things like trees getting their leaves earlier, earlier flowering, earlier migration, earlier breeding of birds and amphibians, earlier emergence from hibernation, and on and on. So in short, really many different species are responding to our changing environmental conditions by starting spring activities earlier than they did 100 years ago or even 10 years ago. So the question is, how do scientists figure this out? Well, let me share one example. So this is another interesting bit of research. You may be familiar with Henry David Thoreau. He wrote a famous book about Walden Pond. In it, he kept track of observations about what was going on around him at Walden Pond. And in recent years, scientists have taken Thoreau's observations of flowering plants that he recorded in his journals and have compared them to those same species at Walden Pond in recent years. And what they found by comparing Thoreau's time and our time is that on average, these species are flowering 7 days earlier than they did in his time. There are a number of possible reasons for this. It could be an urban heat island effect in proximity to Walden Pond. But really, the interesting thing here that I want to point out is that without his data set, without his observations, without him having written that down, we wouldn't be able to know how much change had occurred over time. We would not have the information about what was happening in the past. So there's really great value in having detailed records about when things occur, when they flower, when they fruit, those kinds of things, so that we can see change over time. And our records can do that same thing. What we're observing on our own properties out in nature can help science in the same way that Thoreau's observations have helped science. So we're talking about shifts in phenology over time. Why does this matter? Now, when you think back, I said that 62% of species that have been studied are showing these shifts. There's a problem when not everything is starting earlier. So it's not like we just up and move spring a week earlier. Some things are shifting earlier, other things are not. And so I want to kind of paint the picture, tell the story of why this can be problematic. So if we think about these three organisms we've got here, we've got a tree, an oak tree, we've got a migratory bird, and we've got this caterpillar, and they're kind of in a relationship with each other. They've evolved over time to have interactions between each other. So we've got, I think it's on my next slide. Okay, so the way that the story goes in a good year, in normal times, the migratory bird will be cued to migrate from things that it sees its environment in its wintering grounds. It'll come back to its breeding grounds. It'll lay its eggs, and those eggs will hatch just as the peak of caterpillars occurs, so that those nestlings have a lot of food to eat. And there are such an abundance that also those caterpillars can continue on. But if in the breeding grounds spring is shifting earlier, those migratory birds and those caterpillars can get out of sync with each other, and it throws off the timing of their regular relationship. So responding to the earlier spring weather, those caterpillars may emerge earlier, which shifts that peak abundance of caterpillars earlier. And so if the birds aren't able to keep up and lay their eggs early enough, because they're still getting their cues from their wintering grounds and not the breeding grounds, what can happen is that when they lay their eggs and when those eggs hatch, the caterpillars have already come and gone and moved on. And so there's not enough food for those nestlings. And in areas where the birds are mismatched from their food source like this due to shifting phenology, we see declines of up to 90% in the population of the birds. And so the earlier the emergence of the moths, the bigger that disconnect is, that bigger the mismatch is, the greater the declines in the bird populations. And so right here, there are 9 songbirds that scientists have studied and have seen this effect occurring. These birds are no longer have their nesting time to coincide with the peak in nestling food sources. And we're seeing population declines like this. So this is just one example of how shifting phenology can have this cascading impact, and not everything is shifting at the same rate, which is really why it's important, doubly important, to document what we're seeing and when we're seeing things happen, so that we can kind of tease out these relationships and understand what's going on. All right, so summary here. Why is phenology important? Well, environmental conditions affect the timing of life cycle events. And so when we see change in our environments, this leads to change in phenological timing. And those changes can affect the interrelated components of the ecosystem, and then they also affect us, the humans that depend on those ecosystems. So phenology is important not just to our functioning, our existence, but everything around us as well. So that brings us back to the organization I'm representing tonight. Indiana Phenology was founded to collect and share phenology data for Indiana. Because studying phenology is one way of understanding how our environment is changing and how those species are reacting to those changes. And it's also one way to understand all of these organisms themselves. And so because the changes vary from location to location, it really is important for those of us in Indiana to know what's happening in Indiana so that we can understand the places we love and live and want to protect. And so that's really what is behind the work that I do at Indiana Phenology. So we're a small organization. We have volunteers all across the state. We do most of our work virtually, but what we do, our mission is to engage Hoosiers of all ages in collecting phenology data. We hope that it'll increase environmental knowledge and awareness, and that it also will support science-based environmental policy and stewardship, in addition to just being super interesting to learn about. So we work with individuals and groups and schools. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but we do have one program called our Backyard Observers Program, where individuals or families observe plants and animals in their own yards or neighborhoods for their own benefit and then also for science. So right now we have observers in about 30 different counties. In the past 5 years, we have facilitated the collection of almost 250,000 phenology observations, which is amazing. And I've got to say, I'm proud of that. So one of our goals is to be able to compare the timing of different events from one year to the next, and also to compare the timing in different parts of the state to be able to identify trends and understand really what's going on with various different plants. So right here is what we call a phenology calendar. It's essentially a timeline. In this case, it's showing when sugar maples in a particular location had leaves and flowers and fruits in 2020. So you have January on the left going all the way to December on the right, and the color bars indicate when we reported something was happening. So you can see on the top line, we've got leaves, when we had leaves on this sugar maple, and it was from the middle of April into November, middle of November. We saw open flowers in April, and then there were fruits at various stages of development from the middle of May into August. And I think phenology calendars are really amazing tools. You can explore changes, you can use them to make predictions, and you can use them to understand species. And so how cool would it be to have a website where you could go visit and you could explore data like this about all different types of plants and explore data like this that was specific for Indiana? That's really kind of the vision and the goal that we're working toward. So I want to share a couple of phenology calendars with you because I really find this data to be super cool. So you can use phenology calendars to compare years. So on the left here, we have a calendar for Eastern redbud, and it's got the leaves on that top row, the flowers in the middle, and then the fruits on the bottom. And so you can visually see what happens in its life cycle over different parts of the year. And then over on the right, I have pulled out just the flowers line, and I'm showing flowers for the flowering for 3 different years. And you can see that line of April going through all of those. And really quickly, you can see that this particular plant, this tree, is pretty variable in when it starts its flowering from year to year. In these 3 years, we're talking about almost a full month's worth of difference in the timing of when it started. You can also see that in one of those years, we have this little bunch of flowering over in the fall, which is unusual. So when you put your information up on a phenology calendar like this, you can really quickly begin to see interesting things that are happening. You can see that change, and it's a really powerful tool. You can also use them to see the differences between the life cycles of different types of plants, and you can compare them. As an example here, I've got spring ephemeral. We've got those Virginia bluebells over there. They pop up, they do their thing, and then they go dormant almost before this summer blooming common milkweed even gets going. And so they're just a really powerful tool for visually understanding the timing of different life cycle events for plants and animals. So that brings us to Nature's Notebook and how you can use Nature's Notebook to keep track of what you see happening and the timing of your own plants in your own garden. And I'd like to extend an invitation to you to become Indiana backyard observers and use Nature's Notebook in that way. It's really pretty quick and easy to get started. Basically, you create an account, you attend a training session, and then you decide what and where you want to observe. You register your site, and then you get going. There aren't really any special skills required. If you're a gardener, you already have everything you need to know. Basically, anyone who is interested in learning more about the plants around them by closely observing them has what it takes. You just need to be able to tell the different life cycle stages of plants from each other. As you can see here, we've got 4 different life cycle stages here, and I think without even thinking hard, you can recognize what's going on there. Basically, it's get outdoors, look around, and ask questions. So the tool that we use that I told you changed my life when I learned about it is called Nature's Notebook. And instead of using a notebook or handwritten observations, today I use Nature's Notebook to keep track of the things that I see around me and the timing of them. And it solves all those problems I have. It's on my phone. It's in a database. There are really easy ways of looking back at what I've seen. And all of those phenology calendars that I showed you are, it's a tool. They were created with Nature's Notebook. Built-in tools for visualizing the data come with this particular platform. So it's a platform of the USA National Phenology Network, and it's really designed to be user-friendly for collecting phenology observations, and it is used by people all over the country. It's also used by professional scientists, and all the observations become part of a national phenology database. There are, whoa, this is an old number. I need to update it. There are more than 1,200 species of plants and animals that you can monitor using Nature's Notebook, using their phenology monitoring protocols. So it's focused on seasonal and long-term changes in plants and animals. And these changes are studied by observing the same individual plants through the seasons from year to year. So it's kind of focused on perennials more than annuals to some degree. So Nature's Notebook observers collect data using standardized protocols, basically instructions for each of the different plants. They have a data sheet, and it sounds more complicated than it is. So basically, it is a series of yes or no questions about the activity that might be occurring on a plant in a given day. Each of those questions, those phenophases that it asks you about, is defined in detail with species-specific information so that everybody's answering the questions in the same way, so that we can compare what we see to what somebody else saw in another location or another state. And then there's also an optional question about how much or the degree to which something is occurring that you can answer. So you can either collect your data on paper sheets, or you can use the mobile app, and that's my preference because that solves the problem of I can't keep track of my paper. And it has a bunch of built-in visualization tools that are really cool, so you can look at what you've put in as well as what anyone else has put in. So I can compare what's happening in my garden to what's happening where I grew up. I can compare what's happening in my garden to what's happening in other parts of Indiana. And so it's really, really amazing. So let's quickly walk through what it looks like to participate. You go out at least one time a week, you visit the plants that you want to, you search for any animals you're interested in, and then you submit your data. Here's an actual picture of the data sheet. So it asks us questions. Do you see things like breaking leaf buds? Do you see colored leaves? Do you see fruits? And the particular set of questions it asks is specific to the particular plant that you happen to be observing at a given moment in time. And you just go right down the line and say, yes, I see it, or no, I don't. And that is it. So how do you get started? You go to naturesnotebook.org, you join Nature's Notebook, you create an account. You can do this on your computer, or you can do it on a phone. They've got a free mobile app. If you do join, please join our group. Please join Indiana Backyard Observers so that you get connected up with our organization and we can share our resources with you and see the data that you're collecting. And then the fun part is deciding what you're going to observe and setting it up so that it just is pretty smooth to make those observations and collect that data. So basically, you pick a place that's convenient to you, one that's not too big. So the maximum size is about 15 acres. You can always have as many sites as you want. So if you observe on 15 acres and you want to observe on another 15 acres, that's great. There is no limit to how much you can do with this platform. And then you want to have like uniform conditions over the site. That helps the scientists who may be using your data to for their research. And like I said, there are a whole bunch of different species that you can observe with Nature's Notebook. There are some annuals. Most of them are common species. They add new species every year. I will show you a little bit on another slide about what my garden looks like and what I observe in my garden. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes per plant. So a good starting point is, 5 or 6 plants to see if you like this or if it's helpful, and you can always add more plants as you go. The interesting thing about animals, you can observe animals along with the plants, but animals are a little different. So with the plants, you pick a particular plant and you go back to it and you get a really good picture of what that plant is doing, what its life cycle is from year to year. We don't like tag animals and go back to the same animal. You just go back and look for that same animal species in an area each time and record what you see animals of that species doing in the area. The hardest part of getting started is after you've made all of your choices of what you want to observe, inputting all of those into Nature's Notebook. And the reason this is an important step is once you have it all set up, when you go to use Nature's Notebook, you open it up and it has your list of plants, the things that you want to keep track of, and it asks you them in a particular order so that it's really quick and easy and you can just walk from one plant to the next, quickly answering those questions specific to the particular plants and animals that you want to observe. So here is my first Nature's Notebook observation site. So this is my backyard where I spend a lot of time. So this is a really convenient, accessible place for me. It's one that I really was interested in what was happening. So I had just planted a whole bunch of different fruit trees. I think we have 12 different fruit trees in this little pocket orchard. And so I really wanted to keep track of when these fruit trees were going through each different stage. And so those are some of the plants that I observe. I also have a lot of spring flowering bulbs in the area. And so I wanted to keep track of when those were flowering. And so those are on my list. So you can basically everything you see in that picture is my little observation site. So I think I have about 25 different plants that I picked in there. And in about 15 or 20 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, I can wander through my yard, enjoy the peaceful Sunday afternoon, and I can collect my data. And it goes straight in onto my phone, and then it goes and gets saved in the database, and I can look back at it and access it and have that record of when things were happening in my yard for the future. Okay, which brings us to the last step and the most fun step, and that's making those observations. You can do things through the website and print paper data sheets and then enter them in after the fact on the website if you like that route, or you can use the mobile app and you can just answer those questions right in there. Even if you don't have a signal out where you may be making these observations, that's not a problem. You can still go collect them. And then when your device makes it back to a place where it does have signal, it can upload those observations, which is a really helpful thing. And so I just want to take a moment here to dig into what the different questions, the different phenophases that you can keep track of with Nature's Notebook. And so the first two are the breaking leaf buds or the initial growth stage, depending on what kind of a plant it is. If it dies back down to the ground every year, you're going to be looking at that initial growth. If it has woody parts up above the ground that persist, you're going to be looking at like the breaking leaf bud stage. You can look at increasing leaf size. So that's before most of those leaves hit full size. You would be reporting that. Then you've got the leaves stage, colored leaves, mostly for deciduous plants and falling leaves. And then you've got like the reproductive phenophases, the flowers and the fruits. So you look at when it has flowers or flower buds, when they're open, particularly for plants that happen to also be allergens. There's also the pollen release phenophase. So people who are interested in studying allergies or tracking allergies, the data that's collected on those particular species is utilized in that particular field. And then you've got the fruit stage. So once you first see that fruit start developing all the way until you get to that ripe stage, and then recent fruit or seed drop. So you don't have every single stage that you may be paying attention to as you're growing different things, but you have these big, discrete, important different stages of various different plants and animals that you can keep track of with Nature's Notebook, which is really awesome. So I want to just take us through kind of an example of observing phenology here with Eastern Redbud, which has these beautiful pink flowers in the spring. I am so looking forward to those. We've got, maybe another 5-6 weeks before we see those up here, maybe earlier for you guys down there. And then you've got its fruits in the middle, and then those heart-shaped leaves on the right. And so if we were going out right now and observing an Eastern Redbud, and it happened to look like this on the day that we were observing it, this is kind of what we would do. So we'd ask the first question, do we see breaking leaf buds? And you would observe the whole plant, look closely, and no, in this particular image, we do not see any breaking leaf buds, but we do see lots of leaves. So we would answer yes to that second one. For increasing leaf sized, most of these leaves look like they're mature. In fact, it looks kind of like we're getting into fall here. And so we would say no for increasing leaf size. If you look closely, kind of in the middle, there are some yellow leaves on here. So we would say yes for colored leaves. We can't tell if there are any falling leaves because we can't see underneath it. So for that particular one, we would use the question mark, the unsure. And I really love that Nature's Notebook has that option, because sometimes, like right when things are just about to open up, the buds are about to open up, you can't, it's really hard to say for sure, yes, it's open right now. And so it gives you that question where you can put in that you're not sure and answer it that way. If we were to keep going down the list, flowers or flower buds, yes, we see some. We don't see any open flowers here. We don't see pollen release, but we do see some fruits. There's one that might look like a twig right in the middle. It's up, coming out of the plane toward us, and it's a ripe fruit. And then again, we can't see recent fruit or seed drops. So if we answered all those questions, this is basically what it would look like, how we answered it. So as you can see, it's really, really quick, easy to keep track of this data. And that's really what made me fall in love with Nature's Notebook, is how easy it was to keep the information that I was trying to keep track of, but not doing a consistent job of. And with Nature's Notebook, I can do that easily. If you were to do animals, the process is a little bit different. It's a checklist. So you look around, do I see this particular species? If I was looking at a robin, I would say, hey, yeah, I did see a robin on this day. And then you can answer some questions about what you see it doing. So here we'd say that we saw a live individual in an occupied nest, and so forth. So as an organization, we offer a variety of resources to help observers. We have trainings, we have online resources, we like answering questions, but really our goal as an organization is to help people collect this information and keep track of what they're seeing happening, particularly those people that are already keeping track of this information, and offering another tool that might make some of that a little bit easier for you. And just to kind of bring things home here, I really love phenology. I love plants. You can observe it on so many different levels, from that big landscape level flashing past window when you're driving down the street, to looking at a branch, the flowers on the branch, but then all zooming all the way into the parts of the flower. And I love how thinking about plants in this way really brings me closer to them and helps me understand what's going on better than I can without paying attention to that level. So I think that brings it to the end. I love this quote. Keeping records enhances the pleasure of the search. Keeping track of the stuff and writing it down adds another level. I know you are surely well familiar with the life cycle of the plants in your gardens, but by using Nature's Notebook, you are not only keeping track of that information for yourself, but that data helps scientists, and it also helps us create a valuable data set for future generations so that they can better see the change over time and understand how things were in our day and how things have changed over time. So with that, I see that there are a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions. And
Amanda, that was great. On behalf of everybody from Sunnyside, we appreciate your time. I think everybody learned something. There are a few questions. And for anybody else who has questions, I remind you to put them in the chat box for us, please. Do you need to start at the beginning of spring, or can you join anytime?
you can join anytime. Yeah, there's no right time, no wrong time.
Okay. And then did you say that observers are expected to report on a weekly basis, or how often?
So the ideal is a weekly basis. To be honest, I don't make it out weekly. I typically manage about 3 times in an average month. Most of our partner sites, so our organizations that we work with, go out on average 3 times. Though in the spring, when things are really speeding up and happening, sometimes I go out more than once a week.
Okay. And then Diane asked, is there data that suggests changes in timing of spring predicts what happens during the summer or when the first frost occurs?
That's a good question. I don't know that changes in the timing of spring predict what will happen in the summer. I do know that some of the fall changes impact what happens in the spring. And so there are some connections between different seasons. I do know one particular bit of research showed that what happened in spring really didn't say anything about what was going to be happening in fall. It was not predictive at all of that. And what really made that difference in the fall end of things was water availability for the summer, and then the temperatures closest to the fall and those colder temperatures. So it's interesting, but it's really different for every different species because they have different things that cue them to go to different stages. So hard to make big sweeping conclusions like that.
I can understand that. And then Diane also asked, looking at the Indiana map, are there observers in Floyd or Clark County yet?
I don't think that we do. We may have had one observer kind of like on a county border in the past. So I'd love more observers down there.
Okay. All right, the 60 people that are paying attention tonight, think about that. And then Jet asked, can people who do not want to be observers still review the data that has been observed?
Yes. So there are a couple of different ways that you can review that data. One, you can go to Nature's Notebook, to their website, or the USA National Phenology Network. They're basically 2 mirror images of each other, 2 different websites, 2 different ways to get there. And you can download any of the data that's in their database. You can also use the visualization tools to look at any of the data that's in the database. Also, our organization is really ramping up our efforts at visualizing Indiana data and sharing the data. So going forward, our website will have a lot of that data analyzed and available.
Excellent. And then Myra says the USDA hardiness zones were recently updated, so now Southern Indiana is now in Zone 7. Did your group have input with this?
My group did not, but there's definitely some overlap, and so you can look at the data that we've collected and you can see that change makes sense. So
Okay.
they overlap.
And then Lee asked, can one just observe 2 or 3 bird species, or does one need to do plants also?
I'm a plant person, so I'm always going to say, suggest that you do plants, but no, you can observe whatever you want. And it can be just 1 or 2 bird species, but it can be the plants as well. One thing to consider, though, is if you're interested in animal species, you may want to consider monitoring the plants that they depend on. So I've got a bunch of squirrels in my yard that really love the hickory nuts that are nearby and the acorns. And so monitoring both the oak trees and the hickory trees and the squirrels and kind of seeing the overlaps and what kind of activity they do and how they interact can be interesting and add an extra layer to your observation of a particular species.
Great. Well, I know Lee asked this because he leads our bluebird team and they have 1,000 boxes that the team monitors for bluebirds and other cavity nesters that use those boxes. So that's would be a good opportunity for them.
Mhm. A
But
side
they're
note
also
here,
gardeners.
we also utilize iNaturalist and collect data or extract data from iNaturalist. So if any of you happen to also use iNaturalist or be interested in, being naturalist oriented, the data that you contribute is also going to show up on our website and be among the data that we are analyzing.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Please put them in the chat. Amanda, I don't see any other questions coming in, but once again, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. I think we all enjoyed it. There were several comments in the chat section um, first, expressing their gratitude and saying it was an amazing presentation on a fantastic subject. So we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Amanda. We do appreciate it. This was really fascinating. I think you probably will get some people who will join your group.
I can add this note. Next week, we will be publishing the calendar of our spring trainings and all the dates for spring trainings, and registration will open. So if people want to come to a training and learn more of the details of how to do that, that'll be something to look forward to next week.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm thinking about vegetables. I focus a lot on vegetables. So that might be my observation.
I'm waiting
but
for the
thank you very
time when
much.
they add all of the tomatoes and annuals and all of that so that I can keep track of my vegetable garden as well.
That would be good.
Mhm.
That'd actually be easier for me to do than other plants, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Mhm.
You're getting lots of thanks in the chat box, but thank you. The next part of the meeting is our business meeting. So you're welcome to stay for that, Amanda, if you'd like, or book out, whichever. But let's see. This business meeting starting at let's say 7:27 is what I'm reading right now. So the first thing we have up is our minutes from January, and Veronica, I'm going to take over. Okay, where did I lose Veronica? Anyway, you all saw the minutes. I think they were in last newsletter. Any questions, any changes, anything you saw? Do I have a motion for approval?
This is Lisa. I move to approve.
A second?
Somebody
You
needs to
forgot
unmute.
to unmute. You all are gonna have to unmute for this part of it to second it.
I
This is
second.
Judy.
Elizabeth seconds. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Next is a vote for it. All those in favor say aye. Those who are unmute anyway.
Aye.
Raise your hand. You do have ability to raise your hand in there somewhere. I've never quite figured out where that is.
If you go down to reactions, you all can click on the reactions and give a reaction of a thumbs up if you want, or raise your hand.
Ah, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
All right. So, all right. All those who, let's see, don't approve, guess thumbs down. Or I don't think there's a thumbs down. Same sign. I'd say that
Aye.
they've actually passed. Okay, so the minutes have passed. Thank you very much. Kathy is next up. Treasurer's report.
There was no financial activity in January, so our beginning cash balance and ending cash balance were the same.
Wow.
Any questions for our treasurer?
Yep.
No. I also want to mention that the annual audit report was completed by Karen Bohannon and Carol Shrewsbury, and they had no issues to report. So I want to thank them very much for doing the audit. Thank you, Karen and Carol. Very much appreciated. All right. Gina, do you have something? You have something, right?
Let's see. I'll turn on my camera. So master learner training's going strong. We have 30 people in the class, and so far no one's said they're completely terrified, so we're good there. We have, let's see what's coming up. Oh, if you would like to help with Ag in Classroom, I'm always in need of a couple extra hands, it seems like. We're in the downhill slide of things. But if you want to help with 3rd grade, shoot me an email. We can probably plug you in at a classroom or two before the year's out. Let's see, starting the 13th, there's an invasive species workshop. That was in the email I sent out. If you got that the other day from my Gmail account. It starts the 13th and meets 3 consecutive Tuesday nights from 6 to 8 at my office. Email me, let me know if you're coming. On the 17th of February is the Ag Community Breakfast. So if you're involved in ag, FYI, most of you grow something that means you're involved in ag. You can come to the breakfast at 8 a.m. at Newland Hall at the fairgrounds. It's Cracker Barrel. We're having taco, like pancake tacos. So this would be a pancake with bacon and eggs in the center of it, and hash browns from Cracker Barrel. So again, free breakfast on me and Angel from Swell and Water. Let's see here. Oh, there's a weed wrangle. If you want to take out some aggression, we're doing a weed wrangle at Community Park on the 24th of February, starting at 10 a.m., meeting at Shelter House 5. Then on April 6th, it is my intention to have a work day at the office because the pond, the pollinator patch all need some serious help. So that's my plan for April 6th. More information to come as I get that figured out. And I think later on we're going to talk about Pollinator Day. That's the next big thing. And then Earth Day kits. We're going to fill Earth Day kits sometime between now and April 22nd for Greenville Elementary. So be on the lookout for plenty of emails from me.
Okay.
Any questions for Gina? It sounds like we can get our hours done right away.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up, we've got the project committee report. So first we have Debbie, Seed Savers, Pollinator Day.
Hi, everyone. Just want to let you know that the Seed Savers have been busy getting our box of seeds together for the coming year. We're a little ahead of ourselves. We will have the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and herbs like we talked about, so you can get those started if you happen to grow them yourself. But we actually have some of our other seeds together too. So at the March meeting, we will have our seed box there for you.
Do you want to talk about the shout outs too?
Sure. So I can go on to for Pollinator Day. We're very busy getting our educational booths and games all ready. There's lots to do for that, lots of materials to purchase, lots to put together. So we will be collecting our shout out donations at the March meeting. Any amount at all is greatly appreciated. This helps keep the Pollinator Day a family-free event. The donations that we collect that night will be listed on the day of the event as SMG shout outs. Then for those of you who might be able to make a larger personal donation or know a business or have a business that would be able to support us, the larger donations will be on signage throughout the event that day. The levels for this are, our beetle level is $40 to $80. The hummingbird level is $100 to $299. The butterfly level is $300 to $499, and the native bee is $500 and above. So if anyone would like to make a donation like that, or would like me to contact someone about doing that, I do have the forms. Gina also has the form. You can indicate your level of support on the form, and it explains how to write out the check and to send it into the Purdue office. So does anybody have any questions about that? We thank you for any support at all that you can help us out with.
All right, thanks, Debbie.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, Lisa.
So following up on Debbie's comments, we're on my end for Pollinator Day, you all should have gotten a text from me about volunteering. If you don't know you can volunteer yet, you can let us know even up to closer to Pollinator Day, but the sooner we have that information, the better, because then we know where we're short of personnel at. But more importantly, the t-shirt and tote orders are due by March 1st. So at the very least, if you would like a t-shirt, which are going to be purple with white lettering this year, and the totes are canvas with black lettering, and they're $5 a piece. I do need to know that information by March 1st because we have to get all that to the printer. And then as far as Master Gardener training goes, I still need some folks to sign up to bring snacks on Thursday nights, and it's every Thursday through April. Gina, when's Master Gardener training finish in April?
18th.
Okay. So every Thursday between now and April 18th, I'm short of some people to provide snacks. So if you can do that, please shoot me an email. And then I'm also looking for future Master Gardener training classes, 48-ounce peanut butter jars. We did the jar test for soils this year, and they seem to enjoy it. And I only have enough for one class stashed in my basement. So if we would ever have more than 30 students, I need some extra 48-ounce peanut butter jars. So just keep that in mind. That's the big Costco size ones. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, Kathy. The Youth Master Gardener program.
Everybody, in case you didn't make it all the way to page 4 of your February newsletter, there was a short article about a Youth Master Gardener program. We're accepting applications now for the summer class. If any of you aren't familiar, we have a class for 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders that are interested in gardening. It meets 7 Mondays. You can see the exact dates on the information form. And if you go to the newsletter, page 4, you'll get to see a really cool picture of Dave Graff with a cotton plant that they grew last summer in the demonstration bed at the youth garden. We have all kinds of really interesting things for the kids, and they each get to grow a 9x4 raised bed of their own flowers and vegetables that they can take home. So if you have a relative, a neighbor, a friend who has a child from 8 through 12 years old that's interested in gardening, or you wish they were interested in gardening, contact me or go to the Sunnyside MG website under events, and you can download the application form. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I also wanted to give you a little update about the Sunnyside Master Gardener webpage. Actually, I'm putting the the address in the chat box, rather than spell it out for you. That is being kept up to date now by our web team, and new information is added to it. We're also putting links to previous meetings. So if you missed a meeting in the past, you'll be able to pick it up there. Since we're recording all the meetings, they also will be posted. Any questions on anything so far? Everybody's doing good. You can tell by your names. Everybody looks calm and relaxed and having a good time. All right, good. All right, so now I've got a few more things before we call it a night. First off, for anybody who likes to write or wants to write, and take take a stab at being a writer. If you always thought about being a reporter, now is your time to be a reporter. The newsletter could use some articles. And you've all are doing interesting things in your gardens. You've all gone visiting different gardens. So write up a short piece. If you have any questions about the particulars of what, how to write it, you can talk to Kim about it. She'll give you a sort of a word limit. It doesn't take that much to come up with 500 words, 200 words. Actually 200 words is 10 sentences. Most people can write that without a problem. So think about writing articles, something that you saw that you were interested in, and something that you're doing that is interesting to you. Okay. So talk to Kim about that, the newsletter. I also want to let you know that the executive committee is like always going through the budget carefully, and we're last year everybody was did a good job of tightening their belt and doing the projects within their limits, and so we're looking at other areas where we can also have the biggest impact for the bucks that we have. And one of the things we're looking at is the Sunnyside Master Gardener Scholarship. We've been doing a scholarship every year for quite some time. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but a question came up whether that $1,000 was best served with a scholarship, or maybe better served by supporting a horticultural program or agriculture program in this local area. And so I just wanted to mention that right now. And if you have, opinions about it, you can send me an email, and we'll also have that on the agenda for March so people can put their input. I just didn't want to spring it on you and ask for your comments tonight. But we'll talk about it again in March. Okay. All right. And as always, don't forget to start recording your education and volunteer hours, right? I know you've all started doing that, which is really good. I also want to remind you about the Tomato Festival that we're doing in August, and we still need tomato growers. If you've got some room in your bed for a few plants, 2 tomato plants, if you have some tomato recipes that you particularly like, you could send those in, because we want to make a little cookbook. And the next meeting for the Tomato Festival is February 26th from 1:30 to 3:30 Purdue Tech Center, and it'll also be there'll be a Zoom link also. So if you aren't already on the tomato team, let me know, and I'll put your name, address, email address down. And let's see, last but not least, our next meeting will be meeting in March will be live at Prosser, but we'll also be on Zoom, but we will be live at Prosser. So I will see you then. And to give you the hours, tonight we have 1 hour of education and 15 minutes for volunteer, which translates to 0.25, I believe. always have to think about that before you record the hours.
Diane,
Yes.
Myra's just made a note in the chat that she wanted everybody to know that the Missouri Botanical Garden has an orchid show now through February the 25th.
Very pretty. Okay. And
Only
if you haven't
take
been
about
there,
4.5, 5 hours to get there from here.
yep. And it's a great botanical garden if you haven't already been there. Definitely worth going to see almost every season. All right. Oh, and Veronica's also put in the chat the training hours and the volunteer hours. Okay. All right. If there isn't any other new business, I call for a motion for adjournment. Anyone to motion that?
Diane, this is Jane. I
Yes.
just have correction. The Turtle Creek Winery, that's an advanced training, is actually
yes.
on Wednesday, August 7th. Instead of, it was written in the bulletin that we received August 8th, but it's Wednesday, August 7th.
Wednesday, August 7th. Okay, great.
For the
So
Turtle
everybody
Creek
make sure you get
Winery.
that in your calendar, the winery. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Anything else? Then I need a motion to adjourn. Okay, Jerry gives a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Kathy seconds. All those in favor? Thumbs up or, say aye.
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 Anybody want to stay here the rest of the night? Same sign. I think everybody wants to go home. You already are home anyway. Thank you all very much for visiting tonight, and I will see you at Prosser or on Zoom in March. Okay. Happy gardening, everybody.